I'm Heather from booktubes, and today is my August reading wrap-up. In the month of August, I read 23 books. I DNF'd 10 of them, and so I'm going to talk about 13 today. August was a very interesting reading month. The first 18 days, I read 3 books. They were long, you'll see. No DNFs. Then the next 9 days, I read 5 books and had 4 DNFs. DNFs don't line up. You'll see why in the DNF wrap-up. It's fine. And then in the last 3 days of the month, I read 5 books and 6 DNFs. So it was a weird time. First one is my reread of The Mask of Mirrors, which is Rook and Rose #1 by M.A. Carrick. 5 stars, favorite of the year, yada yada yada. This is a fantasy series and it is not going to be for everyone. I think that this is particularly a good series for people who are character-driven readers, who love clever characters, who love the con, who love pulling one over on someone else, and or especially like the cat and mouse game of, do you know what I know? Do we know the same thing? Do we know different things? You know, different secrets that we're hinting at. Is it safe to tell you this? Do you already know this? And are we lying to each other just in case you haven't figured everything out? You know, that type of thing. It is not the easiest fantasy series. I would, one, encourage you not to start here if you are not already a fantasy reader. This has a really good plot. However, I think that this is a character-driven book more than a plot-driven book. So if you're a plot-driven reader, I don't think that you'll like this. The first half of this first book is pretty slow. It takes a little while to get into it. About halfway, I think you really get hooked, and the slowness is on purpose. I really do think that it's purposeful, that it's used well, and it makes sense for the series. It's a slow, intentional build, layer by layer. Everything means something. Everything is there for a reason. It is all going to matter, but it is a slow build, especially in the first half of this first book. This is also, I would say, a pretty safe adult fantasy book. There's not a lot of violence. There's no like rape or anything like that happening on page. There is some sex scenes, but they're not very explicit. I mean, it's a pretty safe read. However, that being said, as much as it is a safe read, it did emotionally put me through the ringer. A little bit. So in this series, we have Bren, who is a con artist, and she's trying to worm her way into the nobility. The found family, and again, the aspects of all of these characters drawing closer and closer and closer together is fantastic. There is a romance. There's actually a few romances, really. Then I reread The Liar's Knot, which is Rook and Rose #2. 5 stars. This one I do feel is better than the first one. As much as I love the first one, the pacing in the second book is really, really good. And you already have all of that foundation from the first one. You're left on kind of a little bit of an emotional cliffhanger with the first one, even though your plot has been wrapped up pretty nicely. And the second book really does a great job of moving us forward. It really resolves everything that we are going into this book with. And so you're not just dragging it out to get to the third book. A lot of that is resolved in this book, especially when it comes to character conflicts. The series really works for me because of the humor, the world building. I'm not even like a world building person, but honestly, I love the world building in this. The queer normative world, especially the trans characters. I love how they are part of the world building as well. Romance, the banter between all of the characters, not just ones with romantic entanglements. It really just takes a plot that, you know, I could take it or leave it, kind of like it works great, but I'm not going to pick up this book if you pitch this plot to me, basically. But because of all those elements, especially how much I care about the characters and especially how smart our characters are. I love watching a smart character. You're not sitting there like, oh, you idiot, why are you doing that? Like, make smart choices. No, your characters are making great choices, even when you're like, oh no, don't do that. They are doing good choices based on the information that they have, and it's going to be resolved nicely. I'll say that. And then lastly, I read the new release Labyrinths Heart, which I gave 5 stars. So this is a 5-star favorite of the year trilogy. I will say again, this took a lot out of me emotionally, whether that was because of the place I was in already or what have you, but because I cared about these characters so much, even though like nothing awful really happens to them, I just feel for them. It was a fantastic ending. I really liked the different parts of this book. I liked how we got from the beginning of this series and what we set up, and then we had the second book and we had, you know, all of this resolved, but like, where do we go from here? And I really liked where they went in the third book. I really did. The amount that we accomplished in this book was incredible. And a random thing I love about this series is all the books are the same length. And I don't know, that is like good writing. Our cast of characters is really large, but they are all tied together, and by the end of it, you really care about each of them individually, and all of your romances are going to end happily. So even though it's not a fantasy romance book at all, it is very much a fantasy book. It's great. We'll say again, like, you need a lot for this series. So if you have FOMO or you are like, oh, maybe I could dabble in it, like, it needs a lot of attention. It takes a lot of work, and so, you know, wait until you're ready. This is a series that, while it is very much for me because of the political and character aspects, it's not going to be for everybody. Then I read How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. I gave this 5 stars. This is a nonfiction kind of, you know, self-help, how to clean your house thing, but it is specifically, I think, going to be particularly helpful for people with ADHD, chronic illness, depression, anything where you are just facing hurdles that you just, like, how do you deal with it? She is a therapist, but she's also a really big TikTok following, and that's how I found out about her book. It's very easy, simple, compassionate. Your worth is not reflected based on your ability to keep things clean and tidy, or even to take care of yourself. That's not what your worth is based on. Those tasks are morally neutral, and you can still be a good person and fail at all of them. And I think that sometimes we just really need to hear that. I think that this would help everybody. I really do. Not all of it was new information to me, but like, I just think that it would be a helpful book if it interests you in the least bit. Whether that's because you are fanatical about your space and your hygiene and all of that because of trauma, or you can't be and you really loathe that about yourself, or you just fall in the middle somewhere. I think that would be a great read for anyone. Then I read Undiscovered, my first romance of the month, which is Treasure Hunter Security #1 by Anna Hackett. I gave this 2 stars. This is an old release. It's way back in her backlist, so I wouldn't judge the author based on this book. It was not very good. This is recommended to me because I was looking for recommendations like The Mummy. This is an Egyptian archaeologist and a, security guy. He used to be a Navy SEAL. I will say that the bad guy, the hero, has personal history with because he caught that guy committing war crimes in like the war on Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff. So, if you're even don't want the mention of that, it's in here. It was mediocre, no feels. I continued reading it because I honestly just needed something that was safe, in the sense that I didn't really care about it, and I also knew that the author wasn't going to cross lines that I did not want to cross, and I knew that I would get that with Anna Hackett. So even though it wasn't good at all, that's why I read it. Also, fun fact, I think this is my first month of the year where every single rating is present. Then I read On the Edge. It was actually a reread. The Edge #1 by Ilona Andrews for the Ilona Andrews read along. The Edge one. 5 stars. Honestly, I liked this better than I remembered. I will say that it has some content warnings that aren't present in a lot of Ilona Andrews' current books. One would be the F-slur by a despicable character. So both the main character and her grandmother, when the new men that are new to town basically are introduced, they both view them as possible child molesters. So that's kind of prevalent for like a couple chapters while they're meeting them. I don't know, like if you just don't want, you don't want it. And also, one of the children is not doing well and there's the fear of them dying. The child is okay. I will tell you that. The child ends up being perfectly okay, but there is still that kind of emotional thread through the first part of the book. All right, sorry, I had to put my hair. My hair's driving me absolutely up the wall. So we have a family that lives on the edge. It's a strip that goes basically around the world between the broken, which is our world, and the weird, which is basically fairy. They are very poor. It is an existence where you do what you can with what you have. And Rose, our main character, works in our world, but she does not have a birth certificate because she was born in the edge. And so she is very limited in what jobs she can do. She's taking care of her 2 younger brothers, and a magical earl from fairy basically shows up, and she has a powerful magic and he wants to marry her, and she's like, no, you have to do this. And there's this whole plot that I'd completely forgotten. I would not recommend starting with Ilona Andrews here. However, it is their only series where each book is a standalone romance about its own couple, and then you move on to another couple in the next book. All of their other series follow the same couple for multiple books. So there is that. But and I read Alpha Inmate by Liliana Carlisle. I gave this 1 star. So this is bad. It's bad. So you have an Omegaverse, and this Alpha is imprisoned because he killed some people pretty horrifically, and she is there as like a psychologist, and he is gonna have a romance with her. They cross all sorts of lines. Also, I would say a content warning. It's weird. It seems like there's only like 2 inmates in this whole thing, and it's kind of more like an asylum type thing than a prison. And I would just say content warning because there is a worker who is very okay with like the Alpha raping the Omega, which he doesn't do, but the worker sets it up that he very much could if he wanted to. And because that is such a prevalent problem in real life in these type of situations, I would just caution. I mean, I would tell you not to read this book anyways. But just a content warning for that. So there is dubious consent. Her family was killed by a drunk driver. His sister was killed by rapists. There's no ethics to be found in this book, but this book was a kind of, it was a 2-star. It was a 2-star. However, the Omega has this inner Omega voice. And when I tell you that it was Smeagol and or Dobby, whichever one of those voices you can hear in your head, just like, Alpha protects us. And I'm just like, this is weird and creepy, and I don't really think you mean for it to be weird and creepy. But this is just like weird. It's like really, really weird, and I just don't like it. Alpha loves us. Alpha, I can't, like the 3rd person weird Omega voice, Smeagol. Just, it was bad. Then I read Take a Hike, which is Lovestruck #3 by Mimi Grace. This is my first book by this author. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. It's a contemporary romance where she is left this outdoor company in a will. She knows nothing about it. He was a longtime employee. He was actually supposed to be left it, but was prepared to buy it. And she's like, no, she's very impulsive. They don't get together until the 99% mark. You have them confessing their love and the book is over. So I am not a huge fan of that, but that was really kind of my only quibble with the book, and obviously that's what the author intended, but that's not my preference. But they had good banter, they had a good time. I really liked their relationship. I liked the characters, but I am not super interested in romances where they aren't together. Then I read The Orcs Bride, which is the Silver Fury #1 by Layla Faye. I gave this 3 stars. This is not good. I was equal parts annoyed and obsessed, and I read this trilogy in a 24-hour period. So do with that what you will based on my ratings. But it was not good. You have a human who wants to get revenge on orcs, and an orc that doesn't want to have to court the Orc King's daughter, basically, and the way to get out of that is if he already has a mate. So he decides to take this human. It is consensual for her to go along. He asks her. There is rape of side characters, not on page, but mentioned kind of graphically, in every single book as kind of a plot point, and I just don't like that. You know, I don't like that. The second book, The Orcs Wife, I also gave 3 stars. The first one is their journey and them falling in love. The second one is them staging a coup. And then the third one did not need to happen. The Orcs Empress, give it 2 stars. There's a huge time jump, and they also like jump worlds, and it's just completely unnecessary. She kind of laid the groundwork for this at the beginning because the orc is the only one with silver eyes. His parents don't have them, etc. But absolutely did not need it. Did not need it. Wasn't good. Did nothing. Then lastly, yesterday, because I'm filming this on the 1st, yesterday I read 2 books in a series, and I'm on the 3rd one, and I'll be reading the 4th one. But Bite of Loyalty, which is Blood Oath number 1 by R.L. Calder. I gave this 4 stars. This is a vampire. Why choose? It is a slayer, gets turned into a vampire against her will, and then has to go to a college that is for paranormal, you know, has to come to terms with being a vampire and also falls in love. The timeline for this is really weird. We're talking like, first of all, I'm pretty sure the author contradicts herself on what the timeline is a few different times, but we're looking at between a week and 3 weeks. From her entire family being killed at the beginning of the book to having multiple mates and like being through grieving and everything. I don't know. Like the whole grief stage, it was like, what do you mean? It's 12 hours later. What do you mean? What do you mean that's where you're at, or you can't feel it anymore, or whatever? It doesn't move that quickly. It's just odd. So the timeline is odd. However, the pacing of the books I do really enjoy. I like how it is. So far, halfway through the 3rd book, there are no scenes with more than one guy. So you have 3 guys, but it's each one-on-one so far, although I think we are gearing up to get a group scene. So, you know, if that's not what you want in your white shoes, that is what this is. It's not very dark, particularly for a paranormal white shoes. The guys aren't cruel to her, even when they don't want to be mates with her or they want to put her in her place. They're not cruel to her. There's not excessive, her family dies and all that, but it's over in a chapter. It's not super, you know, it's not as dark as a lot of these books are, and a lot of the time the darkness is across the line that I'm comfortable with, so that's why I don't read as many of them. This one is good. It's pretty safe. The second book, by Betrayal, also gave 4 stars. There's some flaws. There's some flaws in the writing, but I am enjoying it. Her love interest, that is a fellow student, has an abusive dad, and there is a domestic violence scene with the dad in this book, so content warning for that. But honestly, I'm really enjoying it. I like the writing. I like the characters. Again, it's not great. It's not great, but I'm having a good time with it. And like I said, it just is not as dark and abusive and all that as what a lot of these tend to be, which kind of ruins them for me. So I am happy about that. So that's it. Those are the books I read in August. Weird month to say the least, but let me know if you have read or want to read any of these. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.